My stepdaughter said I should be grateful for even a seat in the hall at her wedding. I canceled the wedding funding and let her real dad cover the costs. She realized too late what she had done. Don't forget to subscribe and share your experiences below. Let's get started. My name is David. I am 44 years old, and I have been a mechanic my entire life. My hands have been burned, sliced, and stained with oil so often that the marks never really leave. They are the hands of a man who knows labor, who knows what it means to give every ounce of strength for the sake of survival. For decades, I worked in a small Ohio town where nothing much changes except the faces at the diner and the number of abandoned shops on Main Street. It was a quiet, predictable life. Work, beer, sleep, repeat. 7 years ago, I made the mistake of believing in family. Not just blood, not just the kind you inherit by birth, but the kind you could build through love, sacrifice, and effort. That belief came when I met Laura. She was a woman with a tired smile and 3 children trailing behind her. Emily, 15, Hannah, 13, and Josh, 11. Their father, Mark, lived in another state. He had carved himself out of their daily lives and left Laura to carry the weight. His visits were rare, his calls even rarer, his money inconsistent at best. But still, his shadow lingered in the house. The children carried him in their eyes, in their defiance, in their constant reminder that he was their real dad. I thought I could silence that shadow. When Laura and I got serious, I made a promise to myself. If I poured everything I had into those kids, if I treated them like they were my own blood, then maybe, eventually, they would look at me as more than just mom's boyfriend. Maybe they would call me father. Maybe they would see what Mark refused to give them and understand that love is measured in presence, not in DNA. So I acted. I bought us a house in the suburbs, an old fixer-upper with sagging floors and peeling paint. I gutted it with my own hands, ripped down drywall until my arms ached, hammered nails until my knuckles split. I gave each of those kids their own room, painted, furnished, designed with them in mind. Emily wanted soft purple walls and space for her posters. Hannah wanted shelves for her books. Josh wanted a place to set up his video games. I made it happen, every detail. And in those early days, I believed it was working. I drove them to school every morning in my old Ford, coffee in my thermos. The 3 of them crammed in the back seat with backpacks half-zipped and hair half-brushed. I was the one waiting in parking lots after practice, headlights cutting through the rain, ready to take them home. I fixed their bikes when chains snapped, patched their jeans when they tore, and built makeshift science projects out of scrap wood and wires from the garage. I paid for summer camps, birthdays, braces, and holidays that looked picture-perfect on the outside. Emily smiled when she unwrapped the phone she had begged for. Hannah hugged me once when I bought her the guitar she thought was too expensive. Josh looked up at me with pride when I helped him build a soapbox car for the neighborhood race. There were moments, small, fleeting moments, that made me think I was becoming part of something real. Emily whispered, "Thank you," once with a softness that stuck in my chest for days. Hannah used to sit with me at the kitchen table, chewing her pencil while I helped her with math. Josh called me Dave, not David, not Mr. Harris, just Dave, warm and casual. Felt like progress. But teenagers are cruel. Cruel in ways they don't even understand. Cruel in ways that cut deeper than knives. Somewhere along the line, the smiles stopped. The thank yous disappeared. Emily's voice sharpened, her gratitude turning into expectation. Hannah's eyes rolled at everything I said, every suggestion, every attempt at conversation. Josh, the one I thought might truly see me, abandoned Dave and started calling me David. Deliberate, cold, like he wanted to draw a line between himself and me. When I asked Laura if she noticed, she shrugged. "It's just teenage behavior," she said. "They'll grow out of it." But I knew better. This wasn't just mood swings. This wasn't just adolescence. This was a shift, a quiet rewriting of the roles in our house. I wasn't their father. I wasn't even their stepfather in their eyes. I was becoming something else. The guy who paid. It showed in small things. Emily asked for money without looking up from her phone. Hannah rolled her eyes when I told her to clean her room but obeyed instantly when Laura repeated it. Josh stopped asking me to help with his homework, choosing instead to struggle alone or call Mark, his absent father who lived states away and barely picked up the phone. That was the insult that cut deepest. Even in absence, even in neglect, Mark held more weight than I did. His name carried reverence while my presence was taken for granted. I tried to convince myself it was temporary, that respect was something you earned slowly like trust, that if I just kept showing up, kept paying, kept sacrificing, then one day the balance would shift. So I worked harder, more hours at the garage, extra shifts, side jobs fixing up neighbors' cars for cash. Every dollar I made, I funneled into making sure those kids didn't feel the absence of their father. I covered their tuition, their sports, their music lessons. I kept track of insurance payments, gas money, even the lunches I packed for them when Laura was too tired. But gratitude never came. Respect never followed. Instead, it slipped further away with each year. Emily's thank yous turned into entitlement. Hannah's conversations with me dissolved into silence or mockery. Josh, once warm, started looking at me like I was a stranger in his own house. And Laura, my wife-to-be, let it happen. She said nothing when they dismissed me, nothing when they treated me as a wallet instead of a father. Sometimes she laughed it off. Sometimes she told me not to take it so seriously. But her silence carved the wound deeper than any insult from the kids ever could. I realized I wasn't building a family. I was building a cage for myself, made of bills, obligations, and quiet contempt. But back then, I still clung to hope. I still believed in family. I thought maybe marriage would fix it. Maybe time would heal it. Maybe one day, after enough years of sacrifice, they would look at me and see the man who had been there all along. I didn't know yet how wrong I was. When Laura and I finally married, I told myself it would change everything. I believed that once we stood before family and friends, once the vows were spoken and rings exchanged, the children would see me differently. Not just as the man paying for their lives, but as someone permanent. Someone who had earned a rightful place in their family. I was wrong. The day of the wedding should have been a victory. I paid for everything, the hall, the food, the photographer, even the dress Laura chose after weeks of searching. I didn't complain. I told myself it was all part of cementing us into something whole. If I showed them I was willing to give without limit, they would finally understand. But even in the glow of that day, the cracks bled through. I overheard Emily whispering to one of her friends at the reception. I was walking past the back of the hall, on my way to speak to the DJ, when her voice caught my ear. Clear, sharp, cruel. "Mom married David because he pays for everything," she said, laughing lightly. "It makes sense. Not a word about love. Not a word about me as a father figure. Just money. Just the same role I had been reduced to from the beginning." I froze in place. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I thought maybe I had misheard. Maybe the noise of the music twisted her words. But when I turned my head, I saw the way she smirked, the way her friend nodded. They weren't joking. They weren't mistaken. That was how she saw me, how she had always seen me. I carried that wound silently through the night. Laura didn't notice. Or maybe she did and chose not to say anything. And it didn't stop there. At dinner not long after the wedding, the truth spilled out in a way I could never take back. We sat around the table, Laura at one end, me at the other, the kids in between. I had cooked as usual. Steak, potatoes, salad. A meal that took me 2 hours to prepare after a full day at the garage. The conversation drifted, small talk and casual remarks, until Emily looked me in the eye and said, "Plain as day. You're not our dad. We already have one, you're just Mom's husband." The words landed like a hammer. Hannah nodded, smirking as though Emily had said something clever. Josh didn't speak, but his silence was agreement enough. And Laura, she stayed silent. That silence was worse than their words. She didn't correct them, didn't defend me, didn't even look in my direction. She let the knife sink deeper into my chest, then turned away as if it hadn't happened. It was in that moment that I realized I was fighting a war alone. The children had drawn their line in the sand. They would take my money, my labor, my sacrifices. They would eat the meals I cooked, sleep under the roof I paid for, wear the clothes I bought. But they would never see me as a father, never even as family. I was a placeholder, a man filling the empty chair until their biological father decided to make an appearance again. Mark, always Mark, the ghost they worshipped, the absent man they spoke of as if he were some kind of hero. They compared me to him in subtle ways, cruel ways. Dad wouldn't say that. Dad wouldn't care if I stayed out late. Dad lets us do what we want. Lies, half-truths, exaggerations. All of it meant to cut me down. And Laura let it happen. That was the moment I began to see the truth. This marriage hadn't made me part of a family. It had chained me to a burden that drained my soul. Still, I endured. Still, I told myself that if I just kept trying, something would change. Respect had to come eventually. Love had to grow even in barren soil. But the breaking point came this year. Emily was engaged. At 22, she was preparing for her wedding. Laura was ecstatic, already throwing herself into planning, already treating it like the most important event of our lives. I joined in because I thought maybe this time, if I gave again, it would matter. I offered to pay for the arrangements, venue, catering, dress, flowers. Emily smirked when I brought it up. "Be happy if you even get a seat at the reception," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "It's not your day anyway." For a moment, I didn't even understand what she meant. I thought maybe it was a joke, some attempt at sarcasm. But then I saw her face. Cold. Smiling. A smirk meant to cut me down. That was my reward for 7 years of sacrifice. 7 years of putting her and her siblings before myself. 7 years of paying for their lives, their futures, their comfort. A smirk and a dismissal. That night, I sat in silence, staring at the walls of the house I had built with my own hands. The paint, the furniture, the very foundation of that home, all of it existed because of me. And yet I was invisible, disposable, a man to be used until there was nothing left to take. Laura tried to excuse it, as always. "She didn't mean it," she said. "She's just stressed about the wedding." But I knew better. Emily had meant every word. Hannah and Josh would follow her lead. And Laura, my wife, my supposed partner, would stand by and let them treat me like nothing. That same night, I made a decision. I would no longer fight for respect that was never coming. I would no longer buy love that had already been denied. I realized that I had given everything I could give. And in return, I had been reduced to a bank account, a wallet with a pulse. The next step was clear. After Emily's words, "Be happy if you even get a seat at the reception," I could not sleep. I lay in the darkness beside Laura, listening to her steady breathing, while my mind churned like an engine stuck in gear. The house was silent, but inside me there was only noise. 7 years of noise, 7 years of memories replaying, each one suddenly redefined by the contempt in her voice. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up on pretending to rest. I got out of bed, walked down the hall, and entered the small office I had carved out of the old dining nook. The room smelled of paper and ink, the faint musk of receipts and envelopes. I pulled out the drawers where I kept everything. Bills, contracts, insurance forms, bank statements, tuition letters, camp registrations, gift receipts. All of it. I laid them on the desk, one by one, until the wood disappeared beneath the mountain of proof. Proof of a life I had built for them. Proof of sacrifices they had never once acknowledged. I began to tally. Emily's braces, $6,200. Hannah's summer camp, $3,400. Josh's soccer travel team fees, $2,900. School supplies year after year, easily $1,500 annually. The used cars I bought for Emily and Hannah when they turned 16, $8,000 each. Josh's gaming computer, $1,200. Birthdays, Christmas, vacations, gas money, countless emergencies, each line recorded, each total adding to the number that grew heavier with every calculation. And then the larger costs. Emily's college tuition for 3 years before scholarships finally kicked in, $58,000. Hannah's music lessons and instruments, $12,000. Josh's private tutoring when he fell behind in math, $4,500. The numbers began to blur, but I kept going. My pen scratched across the yellow legal pad, the ink digging deeper into the paper with each new entry. Hours slipped by, the night thinning into pale dawn, until the total stared back at me like a verdict. Nearly $300,000. $300,000 poured into children who had looked me in the eye and said I was not their father. $300,000 given to a family that mocked me as an outsider. I leaned back in my chair, the paper trembling in my hands, and I laughed. Not out of humor, but the bitter laugh of a man who finally sees the bars of his own cage. I had bought my way into their lives, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, and they had taken it all without once offering me the respect owed to a man who gave so much. In that moment, the decision crystallized in my chest like ice. If they would not acknowledge me as a father, if Laura would not defend me as a husband, then I would no longer bankroll their contempt. That morning I made the first call. The wedding planner. My voice was steady, detached, as I told her the funding from my account was no longer available. The florist, the caterer, the dress shop. One by one, I pulled the strings until the entire web of their celebration began to collapse. When I told Laura, she stared at me as though I had confessed to a crime. "You can't just, David, you can't do this," she stammered. "It's Emily's wedding." "No," I said, my voice calm, steady, final. "It's Mark's daughter's wedding. Let him pay for it." Her face drained of color. For once, she had no quick excuse, no soft words to dull the blade. She just stared at me, mouth open, breath shallow. The storm hit 2 days later. Vendors began calling Emily, demanding payments, warning of canceled orders. When she realized the money wasn't coming, she called me. Her voice was shrill, desperate, breaking under the weight of entitlement colliding with reality. "You can't do this," she screamed. "This is my wedding. Do you have any idea how much you've ruined?" I held the phone to my ear, calm as stone. "I do. But I also remember what you said, that I should be happy to even have a seat, that it's not my day. So you're right, it isn't my day. It isn't my responsibility either." There was silence, then sobbing, then rage. She called me selfish, cruel, a monster. She reminded me of everything I had already given, as though past sacrifices bound me to future ones. I reminded her of her own words. From that moment, the entire house turned against me. Hannah and Josh closed ranks around Emily, parroting her accusations. "You're letting the family down," Hannah spat. "You're supposed to take care of us." Josh sneered. "You don't walk away now, not after everything. That's not what family does." Family. The word twisted in my gut. They had used it like a we*P*N for years, wielding it only when it suited them. When they wanted money, when they wanted rides, when they wanted comfort. Never when respect or loyalty was required. Laura tried to soften it, as always. "They didn't mean it that way," she whispered. "They're young. They don't understand how hurtful their words were." But it was too late, because I understood. And once you understand, you can't go back to ignorance. Emily's wedding shrank overnight. Without my funding, Mark was forced to step in. He could not afford half the luxuries they had planned. The grand hall became a rented church basement. The catered dinner became finger food. The designer dress was exchanged for an off-the-rack copy. The dream collapsed into something small, fragile, and bitter. And I watched from the sidelines, not with joy, not even with revenge, but with a cold detachment. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one paying. For the first time in years, the burden was not mine to carry. Emily came to me eventually, her pride cracked under the weight of what she had lost. She stood in the doorway of the garage where I was working on a customer's car, her eyes red, her voice trembling. "I didn't think it would turn out like this," she whispered. "I didn't think you'd actually do it." I looked up from the engine, grease on my hands, sweat on my brow, and I saw her for what she was. A woman who had taken everything I had given, spat in my face, and now wanted me to rescue her again. I wiped my hands on a rag and said nothing, because some lessons can't be spoken. They have to be lived. That day, I understood something I should have realized years ago. Respect cannot be bought. Love cannot be forced. And family cannot be built on one man's sacrifices alone. I had made my decision, and no amount of tears or regret could undo it. When the payments stopped, the silence in the house was deafening. For years, every need, every want, every careless demand had been met with my labor. Suddenly, the fountain was dry. No more automatic deposits, no more invisible rescues. The children who had mocked me as an outsider now stood face to face with the reality of their real dad. The wedding disintegrated first. The grand reception hall was lost within days. Emily's deposit bounced, the vendors pulled out, and phone calls turned into humiliating apologies. She tried to reach me again. This time her tone softer, less venomous, but I didn't answer. Let her sit with the weight of her words. Let her understand that disrespect comes with consequences. Mark tried to step in. For the first time in years, he was forced to act like a father. But his wallet was thin, his savings smaller than his excuses. He could cover some costs, just enough to keep the wedding alive, but not enough to hide the cracks. What had been planned as a glittering celebration was stripped bare. The photographer was replaced with a friend who owned a camera. The designer flowers became grocery store arrangements. The catered meal shrank to cold cuts and paper plates. And through it all, I remained silent. The children seethed. Hannah accused me of betrayal, her voice high and sharp. "You're supposed to take care of us. You ruined Emily's life." Josh echoed her anger, though his eyes betrayed fear. He was beginning to understand, perhaps sooner than the others, that the safety net was gone. Not just for Emily, but for him as well. Laura tried to mediate, as she always did, her voice trembling with the weight of desperation. "David, please. They didn't mean it. They're just kids. Don't punish them like this." But my resolve had hardened into steel. "They're not kids anymore," I told her. "Emily is marrying. Hannah is nearly grown. Josh is not far behind. They're old enough to insult me, old enough to dismiss me. They're old enough to face the consequences." Laura wept quietly, but still she never once turned to the children and demanded they respect me. Her silence had been her choice, and her choice had aligned her with them, not me. The wedding day arrived, and I did not attend. I stayed home, sitting in the quiet of the garage, tools laid out before me like old companions. Around me, the world buzzed with rumors. Neighbors whispered. Co-workers asked why I wasn't there. I shrugged and returned to my work. For once, I didn't feel chained by obligation. For once, I was free. Emily's wedding photos trickled onto social media. Cheap decorations, awkward smiles, the absence of grandeur clear in every frame. And though she smiled in the pictures, I could see it. The bitterness in her eyes, the resentment carved into her expression. She had wanted me to fund her dream, and instead she had been forced to live in reality. Weeks later, she appeared at my apartment door. I had moved out of the house by then, leaving Laura and the children in the very space I had built. I rented a small place near the garage, 2 rooms, plain walls, a bed and a table. Peaceful, quiet, mine. Emily stood in the hallway, her makeup smeared, her hands trembling. "I didn't know it would turn out like this," she whispered. I thought you'd always be there, no matter what." I looked at her, at the girl I had raised into a woman who could cut me down with words sharper than any blade, and I felt nothing but emptiness. "You were wrong," I said, and closed the door. Hannah and Josh tried their own ways of reaching me. Hannah left messages, a mixture of anger and pleading. Josh came once, his voice quieter, his face pale with the realization that his own college dreams might collapse the same way Emily's wedding had. "You can't just leave us like this," he said. "We need you." I looked at him, and for the first time, I allowed myself to speak the truth I had swallowed for years. "No," I said. "You wanted Mark. You wanted your real dad. Then go to him. You can't have it both ways. You can't spit in my face and drink from my hand." Josh's eyes filled with tears, but he said nothing more. He left, shoulders slumped, the weight of his own future pressing down on him. And Laura? She came once too. She stood in my apartment, looking around at the bare walls, the simple furniture, her eyes wide with a mixture of sadness and disbelief. "You'd really throw it all away?" she asked. "After everything we built?" I shook my head. "I didn't throw it away. You did. Every time you stayed silent when they cut me down. Every time you let them call me David instead of Dad. Every time you chose peace over respect. You made your choice, Laura, and now I'm making mine." She cried, but I didn't reach for her. Her tears had no power anymore. The weeks turned into months, and the silence that followed was the purest peace I had ever known. No slammed doors, no insults disguised as jokes, no wife's silence cutting deeper than words. Just quiet, just freedom. I learned something in that silence. Respect cannot be bought. Love cannot be forced. A man who gives endlessly without being valued is not a husband, not a father. He is a slave. And the only way to end slavery is to walk away. Emily's wedding remained small, remembered by no one outside the family. Hannah's music lessons stopped when the bills came due. Josh's plans for college grew uncertain. Mark, the man they called their real father, stumbled under the weight of responsibilities he had never prepared for. And I finally lived as myself, no longer carrying a family that never wanted me. I see now that leaving wasn't cruelty. It was truth. The harshest truth I have ever spoken, but also the only one that set me free. So I ask you, the ones who hear my story, was I wrong? Was I cruel for cutting them off, for forcing them to live with the weight of their words? Or was it the only way to teach them that family without respect is not family at all? Because sometimes the smartest, most loving thing a man can do is walk away and let them learn, finally, the price of what they lost.